So even though the podcast is doing really well and the response has been great, I am going to take a pause on it for now.
Amanda Bynes is pressing the pause button on her new podcast. The former actress took to social media over the weekend to announce that her new podcast with Paul Samesky is going on a hiatus just days after it first debuted.
We are not able to get the type of guests that I'd like on the show, like say Jack Harlow or Drake or Post Malone. So maybe one day, if we're able to get those types of guests on the show, we will resume the podcast. But for now, I'm taking a pause on it.
The 37-year-old ended the candid video by thanking her fans for supporting the podcast, which was Amanda's first on-camera project since her role on the 2010s movie Easy A, and came just months after a judge terminated her nearly 9-year-long conservatorship in March 2023.
Thank you everyone who watched. I really hope you enjoyed it. And that is all for now.
On the first episode of the pod, she and her co-host Ball chatted with their friend and tattoo artist Dahlia Moth.
I want to thank everyone who watched the first episode of the podcast. I had the best time filming it. It was so much fun. I also want to thank Dahlia Moth for being an amazing first guest on the show.
Amanda first announced the project back in November, and at the time, she explained her reasoning behind having Paul as her co-host.
So, me and Paul Samesky are working on a podcast. It's super impressive that Paul is going to be a part of it because he's a scientist and a biochemist. So having his beautiful mind being a part of this podcast is just going to bring it to another level, I think, because he's going to ask great questions, and I think he'll kind of carry most of the weight in terms of just like topics of conversation. Like whenever he and I talk on the phone or I see him in person, he's always just so interesting, and I cannot wait for him to co-host the podcast with me.
Amanda also shared at the time that she hoped to take the podcast, quote, mainstream.